Welcome to the VP Marketing Show, a podcast that takes you deep inside high-performing marketing teams to learn what they do, how they do it, and how they get better every day. We cover strategy and execution, brand and demand, metrics and team structure, today's realities, and tomorrow's opportunities. If you lead a marketing team, you aspire to the top job, or you're a CEO who hires and manages a VP marketing, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the VP Marketing Show. I'm your host, Steve Watt. In today's episode, we went way off script, and it was great. If you're passionate about building real business and personal success, this is an episode not to be missed. My guest is Matt Amundson, VP Marketing at EverString, and we covered some super important ground. TV in the 90s versus today, and what most marketers are failing to learn from the change. An inside perspective on how a famously scientific, metrics-driven tech company introduced a powerful rallying cry, built a massive community, and made history. The often overlooked importance of emotion in B2B marketing. What we need to learn from B2C marketers. Two paths to growth, and why one is more powerful, more scalable, and harder to measure. But you absolutely know when you made it. We went long, we went deep, and we didn't get to half of the things we wanted to cover. Matt will be back for another episode soon. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Please welcome Matt Amundson, VP Marketing at EverString. Matt, I'm super excited to have you on the show. Thanks so much for doing this.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here as well, Steve, and you got a great show. I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Tell us a little bit about EverString.
EverString, we consider ourselves a modern data platform. So we specialize in account, contact level data, as well as, everything that goes into an account, like its technographics, firmographics, all that information. Think of us a lot like a sort of a modern version of Dun & Bradstreet. And that's a space that we're typically competing in, is for business, for people who are looking to bring on lots of that data. I think what differentiates us from a Dun & Bradstreet is a couple things. One, the way we collect data, they use it, they're a very old school standard bearer of data. They use like kind of call centers and surveying to get that information. We use crawling and machine learning to extract the data. So we feel like that's sort of a better mousetrap. We get data more quickly and it's refreshed more often. And then the other thing that we do that's very different is we're also a data science business where it's not just about like, hey, here's all the data, but also trying to extract some meaning from that to help people prioritize, accounts and contacts. So that's EverString in a nutshell.
Are you selling into enterprise, mid-market, SMB?
Yeah, so we have two motions. One that's SMB, where we focus a lot on what we call fit and intent. So is an account a good fit? And then we also sell intent data through a partnership with Bombora. So we can essentially tell our customers like, hey, these are the accounts that are a good fit. This is the right time to begin reaching out. And then we also sell into the enterprise, and we work with, some of the largest businesses in the world, like everyone from Capital One, FedEx, Oracle, M&T Bank, Groupon, Saya, Staples. And for those organizations, we're providing really just a lot of data and again, some of that data science as well.
We're going to have to come back to that because that's an interesting challenge to be selling into a couple of very different markets. And I'm going to assume that means different structures and different go-to-market approaches and all kinds of things. Let's come back to that. But I want to start kind of like this offline conversation that you and I have been having about the past, the present, the future of marketing. You come up through, let's call it top tier established tech marketing. You worked for Marketo. You have led sales development teams. This is the traditional success playbook for marketing, for B2B, for SaaS. And you have done really well coming up that way and advocating for those kind of approaches. But in recent years, you've started to look for something more, and you've started to think a little bit about maybe there's a bit of a new playbook needed. Tell us where you're coming from in that thinking.
I sort of came to Silicon Valley and worked for, one of the best brands that's ever existed here in the Valley, Marketo. I worked I was managing the sales development org. working under John Miller, who's just marketing visionary and incredible CEO of a great company called Engagio, and worked hand in hand with some other incredible marketers like Marie Pergolino, who's now the CMO at Active Campaign and in Companies Public, and she's incredible. And so I often think of, my time as Marketo as sort of like my MBA time. It was just incredible learning. It was really, really hard, but I was surrounded by great people, both in marketing and in sales, and certainly people like Bill Binch and Patrick Donnelly, who are just Silicon Valley legends. So I got this, really great education on how to go to market and how to have this really streamlined go-to-market strategy that sort of took into account not only let's run great marketing, let's execute great from a sales perspective, but let's also like really focus on creating a great customer experience. And I think that's, a big reason why Marketo won. They had great products, but also they were very careful about the way they went to market and how they treated their customers and how they renewed their customers. And so, I got to see from a space that was a little bit outside the inner circle of the organization, I just got to see all this greatness happening everywhere. So that was incredible. And Marketo literally wrote numerous books on how to go to market effectively. And, I worked there from 2011 all the way through the IPO in 2013 and held on for a couple more months and then worked at Tibco for a while, which is a great organization. And certainly learned a lot from that group as well. But sort of having to transition from what was largely an inbound model at Marketo to largely outbound model at Tibco, I sort of learned a very different methodology for go-to-market. And in both organizations, I was either solely managing sales development at Marketo or managing a combination of demand gen and sales development at Tibco. And it really sort of shaped my thought process around what marketing is, what marketing isn't, what are the metrics that matter the most, and how to run an effective and efficient go-to-market strategy. There's a lot of ways that we can measure things. At Marketo, we obviously measured like MQLs and open rates and click-throughs and all that stuff, and was really, really important. But I tend to be somebody who really boils it down to pipeline and close one. And then obviously renewal as well. I think about those three metrics as like the primary drivers for everything that I do from a marketing perspective here at EverString. And I think that those are kind of broad strokes and they don't get into the nitty gritty as much. And, I could be accused of being somebody who doesn't look at top of funnel metrics all that much, but ultimately I'm somebody who's mostly concerned with outcomes. So how do I create alignment between myself and my sales counterpart here? How do I create great customer experiences? And then what can I do from a marketing perspective to help influence people becoming advocates of brand and ultimately renewing year in and year out? So that's me at broad strokes. And I just kind of want to introduce myself to the audience and the perspective from which I'm coming from.
You have made some comments about the fact that everybody's going to market with the same playbook. That kind of leads to diminishing marginal returns in terms of effectiveness and efficiency and everything else. If we're all doing the same thing, how would we expect anything other than just the same results as everybody else? Where are you coming from in that thinking? And I guess more importantly, what ought we to be doing?
I'm like a pop culture wonk, and I think a lot about like film and TV, probably more than like a normal person should. And my brain is filled up with information that's like not ultimately all that beneficial from the sales and marketing perspective, with names of the guy that had 2 speaking lines in Dog Day Afternoon or something. What I often do is I make sort of analogies between go-to-market strategy and a lot of things that happen in pop culture. And one that I've been burning on a lot lately is a lot of people are really down on email as a channel. And there's been a broad focus shift to obviously things like ABM, which is a go-to-market strategy that I think works great. I don't really want to go deep on that. If we can avoid it, there's plenty of podcasts on that if we want to go there. But and also like just digital marketing, just because people feel like those channels are more effective right now. And one of the things I talk about a lot is email right now kind of feels like TV in the 90s. There's a couple like situational comedies or sitcoms, as people to say, that were really, really popular. Obviously, shows like Friends and Seinfeld. And then there were a lot of shows that like tried to basically mimic the beats of those shows, which were essentially, and if you watch Friends on Netflix to go to sleep like I do, you see basically the shows are setup, joke, setup, joke. And this formula was repeated time and time again by numerous TV shows throughout that era, to the point where TV got a little stale. And people started saying, oh, TV it's a dead media. Everything that's interesting is happening in film. And then you sort of fast forward to, some of the things that HBO and now ultimately streaming services are doing, which is sort of flipping that formula on its head. And suddenly TV is, in its, what people are referring to as its golden era, right? Like movie stars are rushing to get off the silver screen and onto television sets because that's where the best storytelling is happening. And I think, as marketers, we sort of have to use that analogy to learn like, hey, email as a channel is not dead. But taking the same formulaic approach that companies like Marketo were rolling out in 2011 just don't play the same way they do today. And so, some of those nurture cadences where it's like, hey, 6 soft offers to every 1 hard offer, they've become so ingrained in our audience's psyche that they know okay, well, I'm going to get an email from this company once every week or once every other week. And then suddenly they're going to ask me for a demo. And I know enough to sort of ignore all of that stuff, and I'm not engaging with it. What I think marketers need to be thinking about less is how do we shift our focus out of that channel and other channels and into how can we be different? How can we do things different in email? What types of things can we send out in email? How do we switch up the way our prospects are receiving information from us in a way that's a little bit more meaningful? And then how do we create these experiences that people actually want to engage with in 2019 that are very, very different from the way people wanted to engage with email 10 years ago? And there's been this, and there's the talk about this in other channels. I'm certainly not the first person to talk about it, but essentially this lack of creativity that exists in marketing as we've shifted more towards a scientific or mathematical approach to the way that we do marketing. Every single thing has to have an ROI. If we create a video or if we create, a live experience that doesn't do well, then we're scrapping it and we're never doing it again. And people take the same approach that they took to email, which is if I make one mistake, I want to scrap the channel. And I think that's a really bad way of looking at marketing. And so my recommendation to marketers out there is think about what you could be doing differently through that channel that could actually break through the noise. I postulated for years, and I've just never had here at this brand the bandwidth nor the budget to do it. If somebody put out an email nurture that was 100% video, that would be transformational and it would suddenly have the greatest metrics. And not because the videos were great, not because the brand that it's coming from are awesome, but just because it's different. It's a different way to consume information. And I think our audiences, our total addressable markets are so hungry just to see something that's not the same old.
So much to unpack there, Matt. I want to come back to the metrics piece of that in a minute. But first, I want to go a little deeper on, I love your TV analogy there. And it's got me thinking about why things are so different in TV today compared to the 90s. And, one answer might be, well, Netflix and streaming means we can now binge consume instead of waiting for next Thursday night at 8:00 for friends to come along again.
Sure.
And the very nature of the technology has changed our expectations as consumers, which in turn has changed the incentives for the creators. So, that would be one approach to it. Another approach might be that might have to do something to do with the finances of it all. And maybe it's easier to attract top tier actors and directors and writers to TV than it was. It used to be that the money was entirely in movies and TV was absolutely second tier. Maybe the finances have changed and that's driven everything. And maybe it's about changing objectives. I think back in that time, based on the way the technology was and the market expectations, if you were piloting a TV show, your goal was pretty clear. You wanted a multi-season show that could ultimately produce enough episodes to get into syndication, and now you've got a lifetime of residual earnings. Perhaps the objectives have changed now. A lot of these new shows are coming out and they have absolutely no desire to run tons of episodes. This is one season. This is 10 episodes. Maybe it's 20 episodes. That's it. It's a big story arc. So technology's changed. The talent and the finances have changed. Even the objectives of the producers have changed. I'm trying to draw a line now that to marketing. Obviously how much of that is true in marketing? Our technology is different than it was in the 90s. Perhaps some of our financial incentives and therefore our objectives are different. Have you tried to think further beyond the fact that this has changed and more into why it's changed?
Love that you're sort of piling onto my analogy. I appreciate that. I actually think that the motivation for television in the 90s was very different than what we think it is. I think we thought of like showrunners as being like, hey, I want to get to 100 episodes so I can go into syndication. When actually the networks were more concerned with, can I put a product on that will get a lot of advertising dollars? And, one of the major shifts, obviously, as we move to, networks like HBO and all the streaming is they don't have advertisers. They're not beholden to advertisers. So they don't have to put a product on the screen that Levi's is going to like, or Clorox bleach is going to like, or Pampers diapers is going to like. They can actually put the audience above advertiser. And I think when you think about how that lines up to marketing, it's actually a very straight line, which is everything that you're putting out through a channel just a drive to get someone into a meeting? Is it just a drive to make someone your customer? Or is it a drive to actually level set with your audience and create something that's valuable to them? And that's one of the things that I think people try to emulate the Marketo approach to go to market, they've lost sight of, which is Marketo put out so much great content that people actually wanted. Brands today are putting out content that leads people down the funnel in a it's very obvious. There's no like, hey, this is something that's super valuable, and I don't really give a shit if you decide to fill out a form or interact with my conversational marketing bot. And that is the place where brands have lost sight of what their audiences are actually looking for from them. They want to be educated. They want to learn something different. And it may have less to do with the values and benefits of the product or service that you sell, but people walk away going, I learned a lot from that brand. And that's the one thing that Marketo and honestly a brand like HubSpot really nailed, which is this is a one-stop shop for marketing resources. I trust this brand. When I'm ready to make a decision, I'm going to buy from them, as opposed to let me lead you down a path that educates you on why you should buy our product and then ultimately have you buy it. Those are two very close strategies, but they're actually worlds apart in terms of the way your audience perceives what you're actually putting out.
That's a great insight. Television today is putting the audience above the advertisers, and that's causing them to do things completely different. And some marketers, but not many, are putting the audience ahead of their near-term transactional demands and objectives, but most aren't. Most are thinking like the 90s TV networks, and how is this going to advance my metrics in the moment? So what does it take if I want to be on the right side of history here and I want to be a marketer that puts my audience ahead of my short-term objectives and does what's right for long-term building of success and enterprise value? What does that cause me to do differently from my competitors?
You look at a brand like Drift and you look at David and Dave, David Cancel, their CEO, and Dave Gerhardt, their VP of marketing, who are so incredibly authentic, so incredibly accurate on the way they sort of see the world and see it through the lens of a marketer, the challenges that those folks are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And they just offer up free advice, free information, stuff that we're all thinking. It's like they're just on the tip of everyone's tongue in terms of the way they're feeling about the marketing that they're running, the pressure that they're up against, whether it's from their sales organization, their executive leadership, or the board that supports them financially. Like those folks over there get it in such a real way. And, I'm obviously not inside their CRM, so I don't have a good understanding of like their metrics, but David Gerhardt can put a post on LinkedIn that talks about the value of copywriting, and he's big into that, obviously, and wrote a book, and it's incredible. It's sitting on my desk right now. And that had nothing to do with putting a bot on the homepage of your website that you're hoping will catch someone's attention and have them interact with your brand. And I think it's the authenticity of saying like, yeah, we've got this product that does this incredible thing for your website. We have it. It works beautifully for us. But like, let's talk about copy editing. And I think that is so cool. And it may sound overblown for me to say it's brave, but it is brave. Like, I think as marketers, we think that, our the dialogues that we have in social media, the opportunities that we have to speak at events, all have to lean into our brand. And it's in the moments where you step away from that people are drawn to your brand more than ever, right? Like, I'll give you an example. I spoke at Sales Loft's User Summit, which used to be called Rainmaker, and they've rebranded to Rev 2020 for next year. And I talked about the fact that I spent all of 2018 running every single day, and the benefit that it had on my life, and the benefit that had on my capabilities as a business leader, as a marketer, as a sales development leader, etc. And I got so much great feedback from that. So many people want to talk to me afterwards. Now, if I'd gone up there and talked about EverString's modern data and our approach to it, the way we collect data and how that's different, and how you can integrate that into your workflows, your CRM, and your marketing automation systems, your sales acceleration systems, like, a couple of people probably would have fist bumped me and been like, yeah, good job. But there's no emotional connection there. And I think it's becoming more and more true in a world that, as we talked about earlier, that has changed dramatically, where technology has changed, that people want to interact with people more than they necessarily want to interact with brand and brand story. And so that is one of the shifts that those two have been on the forefront of nailing, and something that I'm desperately trying to emulate in the way I'm communicating with the broader community.
I am so aligned with what you're saying there, Matt. I also, as many people are, I'm big fans of DG and DC over at Drift, and I mean, frankly, the whole organization, but those two probably embody it more than anyone. I wrote a piece on LinkedIn very recently calling them out and talking about similar things to what you're talking about here, that, really people don't want to engage with brands. They want to engage with people, and can't be people who are just consistently hawking their product all the time. It's what more do you bring? And I think that, the way Dave Gerhardt talks about copywriting and authenticity in marketing, and David Cancel talks about just being a leader of a hyper growth organization. I mean, just so valuable. I'd also say, Sangram at Terminus, and I mean,
for years, Sangram.
Yeah, he is everywhere. And it's not, hey, buy Terminus. It's think differently about your marketing, flip the funnel, bring sales and marketing together as one team. And then you mentioned John Miller and Engagio before. I think that John and Brandon and the guys over there, I mean, I've personally learned so much about ABM from them, from the work that they publish and the way they speak and everything else, that it's been hugely valuable to me. And I think then the interesting thing is we can admire that, but can we show that it drives their business? I would propose that the answer is yes. And I mean, you can just look at the success of those firms and say, well, there you go. But how do we tie a more direct line between the engagement and the love that they're creating and the financial outcomes of their firm? I mean, I would propose that it makes us want to do business with them. It makes us trust them and respect them. And it pulls us in so that we go into a sales cycle when we're ready, much more motivated to buy and much more confident to buy from them than from someone else. But is there more to it than that?
I think you can calculate it. I think it can be measured. I think it comes in places that are sort of like, scores and metrics that are less popular or less sexy over the course of the last 10 years than they were 10 years prior to that. So it's things like web traffic, it's things like net promoter scores. What do people feel about, your brand and how they're engaging with it, not just from a product perspective, but also just the brand holistically. And then it's also interesting because I think it leans in really well to some of the new ecosystems that have been created by brands like Trust Radius and G2 Crowd. People that are out having conversations with their audiences tend to get lots of reviews and lots of people wanting to engage with their brand in a multitude of ways, not just as prospective customers, but also as advocates for brands. Like, I think Dave and I have maybe spoken once or twice just through LinkedIn. And yet I want to be such a strong advocate for his brand not because I like Drift as a product, and I do, or not just because I like Drift as a product and I do, but because I really admire him and the work that he's doing. And it's interesting. I look at a guy like him, and I look at a guy like Sangram, and I look at a guy like John Miller, Jeremy Donovan and Sydney Sloan over at Sales Loft, and I go, these people are just trying to create a community that is enabled and equipped with as much information as it can be around how to do modern go-to-market. And I don't look at them as like, oh, they're trying to get me onto their website so I can look at some report that they wrote. But like, I want to be a part of their communities. I want to be under their umbrella. And that makes me feel great about being a customer of theirs. That makes me, if I'm not a customer of theirs, want to be a customer of theirs. And it also, what's interesting, and I think this is something that we don't think about very much as business professionals, when I buy their product, I want to make it successful. And that's one thing that's really, really different. Right? Because I think people are like, oh, that product seems cool, I'll buy it. And I bought it, it sucks. I'm ripping this thing out. Maybe I can get out of my contract or whatnot. But also wanting to see the same kind of success that they're talking about on a regular basis within my own organization. And that is really critical. I think for a long time, tech stacks have become more and more inflated. People are just like, oh, I want to buy that technology because I think it's cool. Oh, I want to, add that because, that helps me in this channel, etc. But they don't really have this emotional connection to the product or brand. And so, we can get all really excited about a product and then we buy it and we sort of have to deal with the reality of, installing it, operationalizing it into our day-to-day. And that's where a little bit of the magic goes away. And we're like, oh God, this is like, I really signed up for a marathon. I'm really going to actually have to run this thing. The idea of it was great, but like now that I've got to do this, that's tough. And when you're like, no, I want this to work. I need it to work. I want to be the success story of this brand because I want to sort of join forces with these people and sort of fight their good fight.
It kind of aligns with the often repeated claim. I guess it's probably more than a claim. It's probably backed up in some way that we make purchases for more emotional reasons than we like to let on. We make purchases for emotional reasons and we justify them in rational ways rather than economic theory would say we're these perfectly rational individuals and organizations who always make the most rational decisions. So, I mean, I think that does tie a lot of this together, doesn't it? We want to deal with Drift and with Terminus and with Engagio and others like this because of their people, because of the emotional and the intellectual connection we've made with these people and the respect we have for them and what they do causes almost like a halo around their product offering. We want to buy it. We want to get value from it. We want to advocate for it. And so long as their product is actually good, like, I mean, you can't fake it, right? And all of those, all of those are fantastic products.
That's right.
But a fantastic product isn't enough, right? It's necessary, but not sufficient. When we go into it saying, I really want to make this work, now we're in with both getting to value faster. We're advocating more strongly because we're really happy and proud even to be part of the in-group with this. Because the product does in fact back that up, that's a totally legitimate way to think and operate, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is one of the things that while people think about Marketo's go-to-market strategy built around usage of their marketing automation system, one of the real values, one of the sort of secret sauces of that business, and there were many, was the birth of the Marketing Nation. And I remember the day that Sanjay Dalakia came in and said, we're going to start the Marketo Marketing Nation. And this is a group of marketers that are incredibly metrics driven, incredibly scientific and mathematic. And they're saying, how does a rallying cry like that change our business? And yet it completely changed the business. This idea of who's in the nation? Are you in the nation? I'm in the nation. Hey, we think this marketing automation system works better than this marketing automation system. We'd rather buy Marketo than Act On because we think it's easier to use. The truth was it was. But I want to be a part of this community. And it's in community that we feel validated by the purchases that we make, right? We buy something and it like works not as well as we thought. We point to, hey, there's this huge community of people that are all kind of advocating for this product and this specific way of going to market. And we feel very validated by that. What camps do we want to be in? We want to be in with the winners. We perceive brands like Drift and David like these guys are winners, and I want to be in that party. We're driven to these things, and it's like we see it on the B2C side, and that's where I started my career. I started my career working at Red Bull, and we built this incredible community of people who could have gone to 7-Eleven and bought a Monster or Rockstar, but they chose to buy a Red Bull, which was, less volume of liquid and more expensive because of what it said about them. And I think that the brands that are tapping into that from a B2B perspective really, really get it, because we are all inherently B2C consumers. We're just buying on behalf of a company. But we want to be a part of these brands. We want to be a part of these communities. We like what it says about us to have these products as a part of our technology stacks.
How do you reconcile all that we've been talking about today with, let's say, a CEO or a CFO or investors that say, show me the money, show me the metrics.
Yeah.
I want to see a forever up and to the right demand curve. I want to see more meetings booked. I want to see more demos delivered. And this is all great. All this stuff you're saying, yay, let's all, hold hands and say how wonderful this is. But how does that move my business forward? How do you deal with an objection like that?
So if you want to get mathematical about it, you can talk about, listen, we don't have to do any of that. And we could spend a large amount of money every month on digital advertising. We could buy giant booths at trade shows where our audience would be. And we can hire a bunch of SDRs, and we can hire a big marketing department, and we can calculate CAC that way if we want to. The other thing that we could do is we could build a community where all this stuff will start to come to us organically and won't be a function of how much we're spending on digital ads on a monthly basis. Won't be a function of how much we spend at a trade show. Won't be a function of how many SDRs that we hire, but will be a function of who we are in the market and the way our brand is perceived. And I've been, an advocate for spending on brand for as long as I've been a marketing leader, because it becomes organic. And organic is the place that you want to be. Not just organic search, but like organic love and interest in your brand, the way people want to engage with it. Like, yeah, we could have an ROI conversation and say, hey, if we hire a PR team and we get X number of articles published, what's our expected return for that? If we decide that we want to go out on a limb and host a roadshow, what's our ROI on that? If we want to transition that roadshow into a user summit or to a large scale event, what's our ROI on that? But when you have people truly advocating for your brand, people who may not even be your customer yet, that's where the magic happens. And it is a windy road to it. It's a road that's not easy to measure, but when you nail it, you know it. And we knew it in such a big way at Marketo. And I gotta believe that the team at Drift knows that they've nailed it. I gotta believe the team at Engagio knows that they nailed it. I gotta believe the team at Terminus knows that they've nailed it. And there's other brands that are just like, well, maybe we should increase our digital spend by 20% next month. And yeah, sure, that may eat into our margins, but like at least that's measurable. And that's a tricky way of thinking about GTM. It doesn't line up very well to the way consumers consume, and it's not infinitely scalable the way building a great brand is.
I think that's a fantastic pushback, because I think all of us who have advocated for brand and for community and for education and for giving have found ourselves facing those show me the money objective.
Yep.
I think
Of course.
I think your response to it is really powerful. So thank you. I think it's helpful to me, and I'm sure that it's helpful to others who really do want to do more, really deeply believe that as marketers and as business leaders, we have an opportunity to do more. But sometimes the structural nature of the environments in which we work and the metrics and the expectations of those around us make it difficult to break outside of the box. And I think that this is a really important conversation. I think that this conversation needs more daylight and more writing and speaking and podcasts and more advocacy, because I think it truly is how we get to the real power of marketing. And it's not just a coin operated transactional demand gen exercise, that it's something bigger and something ultimately more noble than that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's people who say, hey, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted to be a doctor or a teacher or whatnot. There are people, believe it or not, who say, I want to be in marketing. And it's, there's plenty of marketers who are like, I didn't grow up wanting to be a marketer. I certainly fit into that camp. I didn't want to grow up. I wanted to be a football player, and that didn't happen. But the reason why people want to be in marketing, the reason why if you're in college and you're like, oh man, I want to take some marketing classes, it's not because you're like, hey, I want to build an advanced workflow that allows me to send an email, track how someone engages with my website, which assets that they download, and ultimately what that means for client acquisition. Like nobody, right? Those are functions of what it is to be a modern marketer, and you've got to have all that stuff. But we got in marketing because we wanted to be creative. We wanted to elevate brands in a really real way. And I think as we've shifted so far in the pendulum to the scientific and mathematical side of marketing, there's this natural shift back. We talked about some brands that are on the bleeding edge of that, and more people are going to shift into a place where they want to be creative. They want to put out emails, videos, content that really engages their audience and doesn't ask for anything back. It's not like, hey, I made this for you, so you better request a demo. It's, I made this for you because I thought you would want it.
I love it. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I could go all day talking this stuff with you. Perhaps you'll come back and join me on a follow-up episode at some point, and we can dig into all the things we didn't cover today because we both got so excited about this. And I think it was time really well spent. And thank you so much for taking part today, Matt.
Oh man, I loved it. I feel like I'm going to have an incredible day now as we're recording this in the early part of my day here in California. I loved it. Anytime you ever want me on your podcast, I'm happy to do it.
This is awesome. Thanks again. This has been Matt Amundson, VP Marketing at EverString. Thanks for listening to the VP Marketing Show. We hope you'll join us next time.